you are going to want to see this ad. So if you don't know already, Mitch McConnell is a challenger running against him for his Kentucky Senate seat, and he's calling himself Kentucky Mike, and it's a really great ad. Let's take a look, then we're going to talk about it.
We're facing the worst pandemic in living memory. And as soon as things got tough, Mitch McConnell did what all great leaders do. He ran away, split in town to hang out with his pal Brett Kavanaugh. While he was having cocktails with Brett, I called on Mitch to pass an emergency universal basic income and to stop blocking the House from helping Kentuckians survive this pandemic.
The Speaker and House Democrats instead chose to produce an ideological wish list.
Then, on the morning of Tuesday, March 17th, our campaign released an ad giving him the nickname he deserves, Corona Mitch. The ad took off. The Courier-Journal called it Blistering and the toughest ad of the 2020 cycle. It even provoked a flustered response from Mitch McConnell's former campaign manager. Why? Because I told the truth. We told the truth about Mitch McConnell choosing his own political power over protecting our people. We told the truth about him letting Trump cut CDC funding, endangering Americans. We told the truth about him delaying a bill that would save working people during this pandemic. Less than 5 hours later, Mitch McConnell scurried back into the Capitol and reversed his position. Now he said he would support an emergency universal basic income stimulus.
In particular, we're examining policy tools to put money directly and quickly into the hands of American families.
We know he's not supporting these ideas because he suddenly grew a heart. He's worried about losing his seat. He's worried about losing to me. The fear of people losing their lives was not enough to get Mitch to do the right thing. Only the fear of losing his re-election, the fear that we instilled in him, got him to finally do the right thing by the American people. If Corona Mitch needs to be scared like this to finally do his job, then I'll keep him scared for the next 8 months, and then we'll win.
Wow. I will never think about Mitch McConnell without thinking about Corona Mitch. That was without a doubt one of the best ads that I've ever seen. And Cenk Uygur jumping in on it saying, this is how you run a campaign. This guy can beat Mitch McConnell. He's already got Corona Mitch running scared. Lieutenant Mike reporting for duty. Fantastic ad. I'm going to be linking down a description I'm going to be putting a link down in the description if you want to donate to Kentucky Mike so we can take out Corona Mitch. You can help out Kentucky Mike. Now, the other thing I also want to talk a little bit about in this video is the economic plan which Mitch McConnell did finally put together after Kentucky Mike attacked him the first time around. So initially it seems like this is a really great plan. Like if you just look at the headline, it provides $1,200 checks for individuals making up to $75,000 and then tapers off up to $99,000. Now you could criticize that and say, look, the numbers should go a little bit higher, because one thing that we are seeing out of this economic crash right now is that it's not just affecting lower income workers as we might have initially thought, in the first days of it. It looks like, no, it's affecting white collar workers making significant amount of money also, because their hours are being cut and their, bosses like, hey, I can't pay you as much, or they're being unemployed as well. And so you could argue that the number should go higher than 75,000 or whatever. But surprisingly, if you actually look at the criticisms of the McConnell plan, it's actually not on that lines. The primary kind of criticism comes calling it regressive and calling it penalizing the poor. And by the way, this is Josh Hawley. Josh Hawley is a Republican in Congress. You might not always agree with Josh Hawley, but I'll tell you this, credit where credit is due. You've got to give credit for him here. Standing up against your party is always a difficult thing to do. And so, kudos for that. Josh Hawley saying relief to families in this emergency shouldn't be regressive. Lower income families shouldn't be penalized. So what do we mean when we say that the Republican plan is regressive and that it's penalizing the poor? Well, when you actually look into the details, the more specifics of the plan, how it actually works is that the $1,200 number you see is really for families making literally that $75,000 number, and it actually tapers down if you are making less than that. So if you were bringing in $20,000 or $30,000, which by the way is a lot of those tipped workers, a lot of those, retail workers who are now completely out of work, they're only getting more like $600 checks and sometimes less if they didn't have any positive tax liability in the last 2018 cycle. And so there's a lot of people who are just completely, there's so many holes. There's enough holes in this bill that you could fly an entire rocket ship through. There are so many holes, so many gaps, so many people who are completely left out. Literally millions and millions of workers who are going to be in serious economic trouble because of this absolute disaster of a pandemic crash. Are completely left out in the cold, are not getting the kind of income, the kind of money, the kind of just everything that they need in order to, survive and weather this pandemic. And it's actually incredibly important, I want to point out, during this pandemic that we keep our society together economically, because guys, if we have a whole bunch of people also going bankrupt during this pandemic, that's only going to make it worse. That's only going to lead to a situation where it's harder to control the pandemic. So, I mean, this is more than ever, this really is a time to buck the neoliberal consensus. This is a time to buck the corporate consensus, because the other thing about this bill is it gives a ton of, literally hundreds of billions of dollars to corporate bailouts. And I want to make something clear. There is a case to be made for bailing out certain critical industries like Boeing and the airline industries. Now, you can criticize their previous practices. For instance, how the last time around when we gave them that Trump tax cut, what did Boeing do? What did a number of other corporations do? They just, they gave themselves bonuses and they engaged in stock buyback. So serious criticism for that. But you could make the case that, look, these guys, as much as we're angry at them, as much as we need to implement more regulation, they still need to be bailed out. Fair enough. But let me make one other point clear. This program, which the Republicans laid out, is filled with means testing. It's, if you make this much, then you get that much, and then what about this? And then if you fall into this other bracket, then it changes a little bit there. But the bailouts hardly have any kind of means testing control on it. There's literally a $150 billion slush fund. $150 billion. That's just like, sure. If you look like you're in trouble and then you fill out some paperwork, sure, you can get it. Now, to be fair, I'm sure there'll be a little bit more controls on it than that. But my point here is this. Means testing is always used against the poor. Means testing always prevents the poor from being able to get access to it, because they don't even have the lawyers, by the way, to go through and figure out exactly how it works. So then they fill something out wrong, and then they don't end up getting anything. And then they have to apply all this paperwork. And basically, means testing ends up just making it more difficult for poor people to actually get access to the social programs that they're entitled to. And by the way, I want to make another point here. Is this actually goes to a prominent criticism that the left really has been making against neoliberals for quite some time now, which is that we should have universal programs and not just means-tested programs. And this is something that's actually really important to me. I don't know if you remember, but just a few weeks ago, Joe Biden adopted supposedly one of Bernie Sanders' proposals of free college and free college tuition, which, sure, good on it. But if you actually paid attention to the details, the program he adopted was actually more like Pete Buttigieg's plan, which is that it cuts off at $125,000. It's not a universal program. It's a program for people making less than $125,000. Now, you're like, well, hold on. Why do we need to be paying for college for people making over $125,000? And I understand that criticism, and it's a fair criticism, and means-tested programs might be a way towards universal programs. But in general, the left, and this is my personal view. You may disagree, and that's fair, but I'm just telling you how I feel about it. In general, the left has always felt that universal programs are the way to go. And the reason for that is, yes, because of the bureaucratic paperwork, which does objectively just, facts, you can look at it, make it less likely that people apply for the relevant programs even when they're entitled to it. I think that that's a serious criticism, and it's an incredible reason to go for universal programs. But also, just secondly, I think the disposition towards social programs, which we should have, the social programs which we believe in, should be universal, because we should treat them as rights. We should treat them as, this is just what you get, just because you're a citizen, because you're a human. If we treat it as, it's only for people making less than $125,000, then it's treated just as that. It's treated out as, it's a handout for people who need it. As opposed to this colleges, this tuition, whatever, is just something that we do because We're citizens because that's what we believe in as a country. We believe that education is a right. And so by treating it as, oh, it's only for people making less than $125,000, it implicitly treats college tuition as something that, you know, we're only doing it because college tuition furthers the economy, right? It goes back to this idea that the purpose of government is just to accelerate the economy, right? People in Congress, people in government, the president are just managers of the economy. And that's what the goal of public policy is. And that's some of it. That's part of it. But it's more than that. It's also to further a common good, further a public purpose. And that's really what I think we see when it comes to this coronavirus response, when it comes to a debate about whether or not we have means-tested programs or whether or not we have a universal program and the like. Is the role of government, is the role of politicians, is the role of people who are in a position of leadership just to be managers of the economy, to try to figure out the perfect way to tweak things in order to maximize economic growth? Or is the purpose of the economy to allow human flourishing, to allow people to live their best kind of life? Live the kind of life that they want to live and have actual freedom, actual opportunities in life. And for me personally, I think that it's the latter. I think that that's the role of government. I think that that's the role of the good society. And so I am objecting to means testing, not just for those practical reasons that I was laying out previously that are very real and very relevant, but also because I think that it contains in it the wrong disposition towards government. It contains in it the wrong conception of politics that I think we should really push back against, that we should really fight against. So anyway, that's just sort of what I wanted to bring up in this video. And, you know, Mitch McConnell really has it coming to him. I hope Kentucky Mike is, even if Kentucky Mike doesn't win, I really hope that he's able to push Mitch McConnell, push Corona Mitch to be able to do the right thing and fight for the right things, at least a little bit more than he has been in the past. Hopefully, you know, Kentucky Mike can keep hitting him and be the goad to get Mitch McConnell going the right way. So anyway, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.